That's Jefferson. Climbs the ladder. Oh, my goodness.
Is up? Giovanni JJ back here from Run Pure Sports, Run Pure Bets, here to talk a little baseball. Saturday, June 17th. What's up, Jason? Another decent slate today. I know I've talked often on this in terms of the time slots of these games being, not ideal. I think again today, just another weird timing of these games. You got 2 o'clocks and you just have like a bunch of 4 o'clocks again. Like, I get it in a certain way, like, because the West Coast, I'm sure, prefers, this later brand of action, I guess. But I don't know. There's got to be a part of it that's nice to, like, wake up at 9 a.m. on the West Coast and have, like, a game that starts at 10, these 1 o'clock games. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm personally not a fan. I know I've expressed this before, but, like, I'm just not a fan of these slates being so middle heavy. What is there literally, like, 9 games at 4 o'clock today? It looks like. I don't get it. But it is what it is. What's up, Greg? What's up, Brocare? So last Saturday, reverse sweep, right? 3 games. Now, I often like to say, and then just to be fully transparent, then Sunday, I felt like I should have had a sweep the other way, 3-0. I ended up going 2-1. The game that lost, I know, was the Cards. And I even said in that game behind Wainwright that, like, I felt good that the game would be tied, or even the Cardinals might have a slight lead after 6 or 7. Wainwright pitched pretty well. They led most of the game, and then I don't know, they let Wainwright stay out there too long, and then and then it was tied into the pens, which I said if we get to that point and it's tied. I thought it was a huge advantage for the Cards. The Reds had used all their bullpen arms the day before, and what did the Reds do? They went right back to those same bullpen arms again, back-to-back days. Cardinals had fresh arms, didn't matter. Still gave the game away. But it is what it is. I mean, it was nice to get one back the following day, but you kind of hope that the 60-40s in terms of call it the games you feel like you got aces against. Aces against kings, or even slightly worse. You'd like to think that those cash, en route to the percentages, but obviously sometimes it doesn't go that way. It was nice yesterday. I hit a few games. I know I hit the under in the Royals game pretty easily, sweat free against the Angels, and I know I hit. I'm sorry, the under in the Angels Royals game pretty sweat free, and I know I hit the over in the Pirates Brewers game. That cashed in the 7th inning. So. Ultimately it was a good day yesterday. Looking to bounce back. Baseball's been good for me this year. Not great, but good. Tennis has just been awful, right? So that's kind of skewing my ROI and very frustrating. But I've already discussed on how I just believe that sport's kind of going through a change or changing of the guard as far as how you handicap the sport. And that's the thing that I think doesn't get addressed a lot with just betting in general, right? And I'm mentioning tennis, right? But in reality, it applies to all sports. I think, like, for people that aim to be a full-time handicapper, right? And I always say this, right? Like, if you're going to be a handicapper, I do believe you need other sources of income, and not because you can't do it well, but the other sources of income help from a bankroll management standpoint, right? Because it's very easy to go down to start tilting. And this, by the way, this isn't only about betting. This is really gambling too, right? Because I think we all deal with tilt in our own way, right? Some people are a little more numb to it than others. Like, my dad's very numb to it. I kind of respect that a lot about him. But, like, for me, the tilting angle is hard, especially when you're losing your own money a lot in a short burst. It's hard to kind of get back on that horse. And that's the other thing, right? Like, for instance, and I know I tend to go down these rabbit holes, but I do feel like it's semi-informative for you guys. Like, if you have a specific trade, right? Whatever that trade is, right? Like, maybe you're a carpenter, or maybe you're a finance guy, or maybe you're an executive, whatever it is, right? What's up, Richie? That's a trade that you're skilled at, right? It's not like you're going to lose that skill. I mean, sure, you can get out of the game for a while and not be as robust at that said skill, but it's still a trade that you learned, that you've gotten better with over time, and you don't just lose that, right? With sports betting and gambling in general, it's a consistent trade that you need to constantly improve upon, right? Because the world around you in relation to sports changes and evolves every day, every week, every month, every year. And your process around that has to change too, right? Your simulations, your models, your algorithms, whatever you're using, whatever you're trying to subjectively um, enhance, right? Versus your competition. Your competition might be people in the DFS lobbies. Your competition might be, sports books in general. Your competitions might be betting competitions with other individuals. It doesn't really matter, right? But what does matter is the fact that you need to consistently be keeping up to speed with your game and how you're adjusting to the market around you, the sports betting market, right? And I think that's kind of like a misnomer by a lot of people in the space, right? Maybe you start out gambling, you start out sports betting, DFS, whatever it is. You start out for your first year, and woof, all this magic, right? All this good fortune and all this good luck that maybe you convinced yourself was skill based, right? And not to say it couldn't have been, but I do think we are very quick to affirm ourselves when we're doing well, and we're not as quick to realize our mistakes when we're not doing well. And I think that that's one of the biggest respect factors that I have for guys that have been doing this for a really long time. Just the ability to consistently evolve with the market and evolve with sports betting and evolve with gambling in general, whether it's horses, it doesn't really even matter. Just being able to adjust to the market around you consistently, and it's an ever growing process, right? That's what makes it so different. That's what makes it so challenging, and I think that's what makes it fun as well, right? The fact that we all know that there's a very small select amount of people that can do this and profit consistently over year, right? And you just kind of tip the cap. And there's so much frauds in the industry, right? It's like car salesman in its own way. So you're also trying to sift through, if there's people you quote unquote trust their opinions on, right? There's also people, there's also people in the industry that you kind of trust, and they'll likely let you down at one point or another. And then there's people that you don't trust that you just kind of trying to ignore, or maybe they fire up so much emotion in you that you go out of your way to you know publicly berate them. But in reality, as far as gambling and betting and the whole bit, you just got to focus on yourself, on your own processes, on your own strategies, and it needs to be constantly evolving, right? Because it's it's a fun industry to navigate, and it's also a fun industry to, or I'm sorry, it's an industry that can easily put you down rabbit holes, right? And you've seen it, right? You've seen a bunch of people, whether it's they lose their cool emotionally, or they just feel like you just feel like you're talking to an addict, right? Instead of somebody who's actually trying to efficiently run a process and efficiently manage their money and efficiently manage a bankroll. So I don't think enough of this stuff gets said, on a regular basis. So I do try to kind of like squeak it in now and again, because it's tough, right? In a world riddled with a need for external validation, it's hard. It's hard to consistently look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I'm doing this correctly. Yes, I'm doing that correctly. Yes, I know I'm moving my feet forward in the right direction here. Because it is an industry filled with a ton of subjectiveness, right? But that's what makes it challenging. That's what makes it fun. And that's what, lets the cream rise to the top. And I find in this industry in particular, the people that are like really good, they're often not very humble. And that creates its own kind of weirdness to it. And I get it. You're at the top of the game, or you're at the top of your game in whatever facet, and you feel the need to express that. But it's like I often say, and like it's been said from many before, if you're that good at something, you don't have to brag about it. Other people do that for you. Um, so you see, JD gets it. JD gets it. So just trying to provide a little perspective. Um, glad you appreciate it, Javon, as well. So anyway, we'll start talking through the slate here. Go through these games game by game. I did bet 3 games today, but as I often say, like, you don't necessarily have to. I mean, not that you do anyway, but you don't necessarily have to follow the bets I've made. But you can also leverage, kind of the mindset that I approach some of these games with, and whether I choose to bet it or not bet it. Maybe it could, move the needle for you in one direction or the other. Maybe you were going to bet a game that now you're not going to bet, or maybe you weren't going to bet a game that now you want to bet. So it's not. I know that this show, in reality or in retrospect, quote unquote, gets graded on how the best bets do on a isolated basis. But in reality, you use the content however you best see fit. Because there's an ass for every chair, right? All right, so Jason, who's going to win the NL Central? Great question. Great, great question. What a shit show. And I'd also argue, well, so the Cardinals to me are such a frustrating team. Because they're way too talented to be playing as poorly, and they're on another losing streak now after they kind of almost got themselves to 500 a few weeks back, and then they started playing fake base, not the version of themselves of baseball. You got an entire division that's practically got a negative run differential. The Cubs I think are like 10 over or plus 10-ish run differential, but outside of that, they're all in negatives. I don't think the Pirates can sustain themselves. The Brewers make sense to kind of elevate. The Cardinals make sense to elevate, but man, they just cannot get things right. Their pitching hasn't been there. Their hitting hasn't been there. The Cubs feel like a team that's just going to start, fading out after this little streak that they're on. The Reds are trendy, sure, but I don't know. The team feels like they're about 2 years away from being a real contender, just not now. So it's an ugly division for sure. Just strange all around. But no, I get it, right? Reds have been trendy, and obviously you like to follow trends in this sport to a certain extent, and they've been playing well. So you can't look past that. What's the real story with the shirtless Red? It's just just taking the garbage out. On a Thursday night here, take the garbage out. Clearly, my wife has needs a few more hobbies. Going through the ring and sees that. I guess she could have got a worse picture of me, so I'll take it. But yeah, whatever. We try to be self-deprecating with one another in our own way, and I'll be honest, she's come a long way. Like that post was kind of funny. Like even made me kind of chuckle. Maybe it's because she's spending so much time around me, and I'm so funny. LOL. No, but appreciate the banter. I do enjoy it. I think that more people in general should laugh, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Laugh at themselves. I think there's not enough of that, right? I feel like nowadays it's so hard to be a comedian, like a stand-up comedian. That's why I have so much respect for those individuals as well, because now you can't say anything about anybody or anything anymore. It's just the whole world's become so soft in that regard, and I get it. Tensions are high in other ways, but anyway, we can all laugh a bit, right? Keeps us looking younger, keeps us feeling better. So at some point we become so soft as an entire generation where you can't say nothing to nobody. With that said, yeah, no, I was proud of her. That post was actually pretty funny. All right, so let's see. Start talking a little baseball. I know we've already gone 12 minutes. I haven't said a single word about any of these games. But that's I think we got 2 hours before they start anyway, so I guess we're okay in that regard. Twins, Tigers, Jose De Leon, Joey Wentz. De Leon's been good, right? I know it's a very short sample. But he kind of comes off after a year being out of baseball. He's looked the part so far. I'll be honest, I don't really trust it. He hasn't really looked like a good pitcher in his very small sample size of his career. And maybe he's found himself. But the fact that he has the ERA this low, despite a BABIP of like 340, is actually pretty good. So maybe that comes back to bite him a bit. But the one thing with him is he's got good stuff. He's always had a high strikeout rate in the majors. The problem has always been his he walks a ton of guys. So if he can keep his walks down, he might be able to have some sustainability at this level because he's got good stuff. On the other end, Joey Wentz has not been as bad as he's looked. Now, granted, dude's a left-hander rocking a 400 WOBA against righty bats. So, obviously that's a scare. And here he draws a Twins lineup that definitely brings fair share of righties into the mix. So yeah, here's my issue though with this game as far as the total. I do lean this number under. I didn't bet this game. I lean it under just because this is a pretty decent sized number for this park. When you add into the fact it's warm, it's not super warm for Minnesota. You don't have the wind carrying out either. So I think in terms of park factors, I think this is a big number. I get why it is this big, though. I just think it's a little high. And again, De Leon's been good. It feels like the Twins are too big of a favorite here. Again, it's a lot of faith in De Leon, how he's pitching this small sample. And I do think Wentz has some positive regression coming. Will come on the road against a righty-heavy Twins lineup. I mean, probably not, but slightly under at the number. Again, I don't love the spot. I don't think there's anything crazy to target here. And as far as DFS goes, I guess if you're doing all day slates, to me, I just completely avoid this game in total. I get it. You might have some wants to stack some righty bats on the Twins end. But I don't know. I don't love the spot. The pricing's not great on these bats either. So I just call it an off spot for me entirely. DFS betting. slightly under again, but nothing I love. Heading to Wrigley here to see my O's. I'll be honest, boy, I didn't even realize you were an O's fan. I mean, I know you're from Chicago, but I didn't even realize you were an Orioles fan. Um, Interesting part with that game, so I'll talk on this now. Justin Steele's been phenomenal, but it does feel like he consistently gets oversaturated by the market with his lines. Like this line feels very big for this game. So I get it. The problem I have is Kyle Gibson on the road is just always atrocious. Like I get it in small samples. I'm sure he pitches well on the road. It just feels like for the last few years now, he is just a complete different pitcher home road. The other angle to this is you throw a left-hander at this Orioles lineup. It typically doesn't result in outstanding performances. And you looked at this lineup; they have one dedicated left-hander. So Justin Steele's going to see his fair share of righties. Now he's been good against both. He's actually been really good in general. Slightly in Orioles, I don't love the spot at all. I just think the price is a little big. But part of me also gets it, right? The Orioles have been somewhat trendy this year, right? And for the right reasons. I mean, I don't want to say they're quietly 17 games over 500, but they were getting talked about a lot earlier in the year. Talks have kind of steamed down a bit for them, but you're talking an AL East, which opposite to the NL Central has been very good. You got 5 teams at a positive run differential. You got the Red Sox, who are 500 ball at the bottom of the division. And the Rays are just continue to churn out wins. So overall, O's kind of make sense in this spot. But the reason why I can't get there is I just don't trust Kyle Gibson on the road. I couldn't even remember the last time I bet Kyle Gibson on the road. Again, line feels a little inflated in favor of the Cubs, but all things considered, Justin Steele's been great for this team. Kyle Gibson's been bad on the road, so in theory, I get it. But yeah, another pass spot for me. As far as the total goes, we just get confirmation on that weather. I mean, you're talking a 65-degree day. I'm sure Boynton will have a little tiny jacket on, maybe. But 8 miles an hour blowing in, nothing crazy for this park. You're just not going to get a lot of weather factor in your favor here. So slight lean under there as well, 7.5. Just feels like you're really going to have to get a hold of a ball today, especially against two, at worst case, two mid arms. Because both these guys have been good this year, and certainly have upside. So I just think that under makes sense. I know you could have got 8, I guess, yesterday, maybe even early this morning. But no, good to know. I didn't even realize you grew up in DC there. Because even growing up in DC, Boynton, typically folks that grow up in DC, they end up being national fans. So no, it's awesome. I hope you have fun at the game today as well. All right, so next game up, Nationals Marlins. Marlins minus 165 on the road. Marlins have been surprisingly okay this year, right? You get Braxton Garrett, who also has been surprisingly okay this year. And he draws a Nats lineup, which at times this season has shown upside. But the issue here is Jake Irvin on the other end, right? Man, this dude's bad. I know the Nationals are going through their own motions in terms of what they want to do with their personnel and who they bring up and who they don't. They're a young team. It's kind of in this rebuilding phase, but this dude's just tough to watch. I mean, you're talking, he just doesn't really get strikeouts. He walks way too many guys. 17 walks in 27 innings is absolutely insane. That's why his whip is 1.7. So yeah, the problem is the Marlins also don't really have a lot of relative sticks. I mean, obviously at the top they have Arias, but a tough game to cap. I will say a number at 9.5 for this park in warm weather feels small. The problem is you just don't have the bats from both teams that really make you feel comfortable doing this. In a game like this where weather's supposed to be about 90 with humidity, you almost want to feel like you blindly bet a game over at this park at that number with 2 below average arms. But again, the lack of true, we'll call girth of the bats of both these groups make it kind of tough to want to like anything in this game. As far as cheap stacks go in DFS, this game does fit the bill in many ways. I mean, sure you have, there's not a single bat that's going to be in these lineups that are over 5K. So yeah, I'd expect people to stack this game, especially if you want bigger arms for other games from the starting arm perspective. But Yeah, again, another game where I just don't love it. I don't have any strong takes in this one either. Again, if you're looking for me to take a stand somewhere, I would prefer the over in this game, just because again, you get a light number at a park that's going to be warm to barely two average arms, and that almost becomes an automatic bet. But again, the lack of bats in general make it hard to love betting that over. All right, so Jays Rangers. How impressive have the Rangers been this year? Man, I mean, and granted, they forked over all that money to DeGrom, which at the time I was kind of indifferent about. I know that some people had a lot of takes in one direction or the other. More takes on the fact of paying a guy that's going to be hurt. I actually liked the pick for them. I thought that if if DeGrom if they even got half a season out of DeGrom, the contract was worth it. But then would they even get 7 starts out of DeGrom? So yeah, tough scene there. Dane Dunning for the Rangers goes today. I don't even think we have a pitcher for the Jays yet. Maybe. So it makes the game tough to cap in that perspective. Obviously, if you bet the game now, make sure you bet it with action. So otherwise, whoever pitcher comes in, it might void the bet. But yeah, Rangers minus 130. Again, it's hard to say because I don't even know what arm is going to be going for the Jays. Maybe if somebody knows the arm, great, let me know. I'm happy to give some perspective, but I don't even know the arm for the Jays that's going today. Rangers have just been so good with their sticks. And the Jays have been, good too. Obviously, teams that have been playing good baseball aren't going to be talked about as much as teams playing great baseball. This team's like 4 games back of the Rangers, and I was just talking about how impressive the Rangers have been. So Jays have been okay, but again, makes the game tough to cap in terms of who's starting and who's not. But let me just look at the price. And Dane Dunning's not a strikeout guy either, so I just can't imagine people are lining up to play him today. I don't even see where he's priced. He's 6,800. Yeah, I mean, he's just tough. He's just tough to play. It never strikes anybody out. And it's not a great spot for him either. So I guess we'll just move on to the next game. Players have smashed last 2 free agency. Yeah, I mean, look, credit, Boy, and you're right. Credit to the Rangers. They've spent a lot of money recently, as you mentioned last year too. And Evaldi, I mean, above all else, like the Nathan Evaldi pickup, just woof, made up for the DeGrom debacle big time. And Heaney's been good so far. I do have some concerns on him sustained over a season just because for his career he's just been okay. And granted, he had the big year with the Dodgers last year, but as we know, like the pitchers in the Dodgers just always seem to do well. And John Gray too, yeah, just getting a good amount out of their arms this year. So kudos to them in every regard. All right, Athletics Phillies total 9.5. 2 bad arms. I am seeing some 9 now at heavier vig. I think I've mentioned this to you before. This is basically as high as a total gets for this park. You basically almost never see a 10, 9.5. I get it. You have 2 bad arms here, but again, this park is extremely forgiving, and it's not warm today in Oakland. So it like these types of spots, people often look at the pitching and go, "Oh wow, this is an easy over." But again, there is a park dimension aspect to betting baseball totals, and this is a massive number for this park. So just keep that in mind. That you throw 2 bad arms in this park and the total gets inflated. This park can be very forgiving, and it almost makes it even crazier the fact that Athletics have so many starting pitchers with ERAs over 5 and 6, considering they get to pitch half their games at this park, which kind of goes to show how bad they are. And yes, the Oakland Athletics are almost double in run differential, the second worst team in run differential, which is the Royals. So yeah, they've been bad. They've been historically bad. They did go on a bit of a run where they were scoring some runs for a bit, but it seemed like they kind of median that out again. So yeah, I don't know, strong lean under just because of how I bet this sport. But it's not like you feel comfortable betting any Oakland games. Their bullpen is historically bad. Philly's pen isn't great either. So yeah, it's just not a spot I love per se, but again, it is a spot I think that does make sense to fire on the under, especially at 9.5. All right, let's move to a game. Skip around here so I can move to a game that I actually did bet. Astros Reds. Brandon Belak, Hunter Green. 2 arms that on the surface look good. Hunter Green's been pretty good. Issue with Hunter Green, right? He's got pretty bad reverse splits. He struggles against right-handed bats, And I've already expressed my opinions on Bielak. I am not a Bielak guy at all. I don't it just I just think he's a pitcher that has even more regression coming, and he's had some come recently, but he's got more coming. This is a good spot to bet the over. So I did. I think you're getting a soft number here. I got it at because I know the number has been moving around a bit. Um, I got it at 8 minus 112 this morning, FanDuel. I think it's bumped to 8.5 at some spots. I'm looking at DK where it's now 8.5 minus 105. FanDuel might still be 8. So let me just confirm. And I always hate giving you guys late numbers. And I want to be clear, I don't mind 8.5 at the cheaper VIG if you can find like minus 105. But I do believe if you shop the market enough, you will find 8. And it does matter, right? That half run means a lot because obviously you push instead of lose if it does fall 8. But let me just see. Yeah, so it's 8. Now it's minus 120 FanDuel. So it's moved 8 cents since at FanDuel. I would prefer, say, then it becomes the interesting question. I would actually split that down the middle, to be honest. I would put half the unit at 8 minus 120 and then half the unit at 8.5 minus 105. So it becomes like a minus 112 bet that you still push half of it instead of losing both sides of it if it does fall 8. And if it loses, you also don't lose the extra, call it 10 cents of VIG that way as well. So yeah, that was a game I fired on. It's a pure regression to the mean spot for me. That number should have been 8.5 at open. I know the Pens have been pretty good for both squads as well. Astros pen is obviously on paper one of the better ones in baseball. And the Reds have been surprisingly good with their pen. You have a park in Houston that at times can play bigger, right? At times. But it will be, I'm just confirming exactly how warm it is, but it will be very warm. So they're going to close that roof in Houston. And I don't think that's crazy bad thing either. I mean, it's going to feel like, imagine it's going to feel like 114 degrees in that stadium. So they will definitely be closing that roof. But I do think it's a great spot for runs to be scored. Again, you have Hunter Green, terrible reverse splits, and Brandon Bielak, who struggles with both batters at both sides of the plate. And the Reds have been trendy as far as how they've been hitting the baseball recently. So I just think it makes a ton of sense for there to be runs today. So I bet that over. Let's move on to the next game. Well, I'll skip backwards a bit. Mariners, White Sox. Lucas Giolito, Logan Gilbert. Gilbert's been good, right? And Giolito has been like really good, especially recently. I think this line's relatively fair. Maybe a few cents shaded in favor of Seattle, especially with how good Giolito's been. But Gilbert's good, especially when he's home. I don't know. This isn't a spot I love any regard. I think that the White Sox have been underachieving all season long. The Mariners have also been underachieving all season long. And like the Mariners should be better than the 34-34 record they have. Their lineup's too good. Their pitching staff's definitely good. Their bullpen's good. They're just not a 500 team, despite playing like it. But again, at this spot, it's just not. There's nothing I love in this spot. Again, you could argue that this line should be about minus 145, maybe 10 cents bigger in terms of Seattle. But I don't love this. You're not likely not going to get I'm not going to have a lineup for this game either. At least I don't think I have one. Yeah, it's still empty. So yeah, again, call it a spot that makes an easy pass for me. DFS wise, I'd have nothing in this game, including the pitching. I'd have nothing from this game. Gilbert's 10-3 and Giolito's 9-6. Like, no, thank you to both of them at those prices. So, and I know again, Giolito's been good, right? Back to back big starts. But yeah, easy pass for me. I'm not climbing the price ladder with those guys in DFS. So, all right, I'll move on to the next game. Actually, it's another game that I bet. No, I didn't bet this game. I bet Rose Angels yesterday. Oh, well. Griffin Canning for the Angels, minus 165, going up against Mike Mayers for Kansas City. Yesterday, as mentioned, I bet this game under. Today, I would prefer this game over the number. I think you look at yesterday, and there was a total of 9.5 with Sandoval and Brady Singer. And I continue to say this. I know Brady Singer doesn't look the part as far as his ERA goes, but he's a guy that has good stuff. So anytime he comes off a few bad starts, and I can kind of target him with an inflated total, I like doing that. And he pitched pretty well yesterday. I think he gave up 2 earned over 6. And Sandoval's just is an arm I always like from the left side, especially against a Royals lineup that just is so blah. It's interesting. Like everybody talks about how historically bad the Athletics are. I think the Royals are only they're the Royals worse than the Athletics now as far as record goes. They might be close. They do have one less win, but the A's have two more losses. So as much as we talk about how bad the A's, I don't know why that's the name. As much as we talk about how bad the A's are, like the Royals are just as abysmal. But yes, this is a spot where I prefer the over. Griffin Canning is just a tough pitcher to watch. The guy consistently finds himself in jams. Mayers is not a guy to trust in any regard. Yesterday, the stick struggled a bit against two better arms. You get two worse arms in this spot because, yes, I do believe Mayers is worse. Is worse than what's his name? Than Singer for the Royals. But also the thing here is this is probably going to feel like a bullpen game, right? Because Mayers is the guy that used to pitch with the Angels, I think, right? That's the same Mayers. I know that they yeah, so he was with the Angels. So I know that they kind of use this guy as like a glorified bullpen guy because I know he's been eating innings, but he hasn't been good in this role. I don't know why they even took him out of his bullpen role. He was like okay in the bullpen. He had the 1 year where I think he made the All-Star game a few years back. But no, in this full-fledged role where they're asking him to eat innings, he has not been good. This is a spot that makes sense for runs. Should be pretty warm, Kansas City as well today, which will help for runs versus the game being at night. Yeah, I mean it's gonna be 90 degrees, wind blowing out to left center. So yes, lean this game under. I mean over. Excuse me. Didn't like it enough because I do feel like you're getting near the ceiling at this park. 10.5 probably be that said ceiling. But yeah, the spot makes total sense for runs today. And Angels Angels don't have a great pen to begin with, but they went through their best arms yesterday. So, or their best hold guy and their save guy as well, their closer. But so yeah, lean over at 10. Didn't love it enough to fire myself though. Braves Rockies. So this was a game I fired on. Bryce Elder for the Braves going up for the Rockies against Connor Siebold. Siebold is not as bad as he's looked. However, this is a bad spot for him to ask to have a good start. You get a sub 85-degree day in Atlanta with wind blowing out. Bryce Elder's not a guy I trust in many regards. I know that the Rockies have been kind of struggling over the last few days with scoring runs. I think they've scored a total of like 4 runs over the last 3 games. But before then, they were putting up some runs, and their issue has not been getting hits. Like they have been getting guys on base. It just hasn't stuck in terms of them scoring runs. I know yesterday I think they were like 0 for 5 or 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. I like this spot though for them to score runs. The weather's going to be very warm. Again, you're getting that relatively day game in Atlanta where the ball just carries. So 3.5 over at -105. I really like that. You're getting your 9 at bats. This could be a spot where the Braves get a big lead and you don't see their better pen arms. Bryce Elder does not exactly eat innings either. So you're likely going to get an early pen stop today. Again, assuming this guy's not uber efficient today. But Elder doesn't go past 6 innings often. He does occasionally, but he doesn't go past 6 often. Typically, you can get about 5.5 innings out of him. Comes off a bad start against Washington, but I mean, he actually had a few bad starts in a row now. So I just think that this makes sense for Colorado to poke some runs through. I'm not saying they're going to win this game. They're a huge underdog. But I just think in general, it's a spot that makes sense for them to score runs, or at least get a lot of foot traffic, right? So that's what I bet. I bet that at -105 FanDuel. To me, that's good all the way to -120. I don't know what the books have currently for this game. Or what I know FanDuel had it at -105 earlier. Let me just look at DraftKings so I know it's a little more popular. DraftKings -115, which is fine to fire there. But yeah, FanDuel -105 was available about 3 hours ago. And that's where I fired. So I do like there to be runs from the Rockies side today. And of course, I'm not trying to pick them to win the game or whatnot because the Braves literally could score a ton of runs today if they want. And the reason why I didn't bet it over is because, look, you need in a perfect world, this game, assuming it's 10, right? Like right now, is it still 9.5? Yeah, so it's 10, right? So for me to win a game at 10, the Braves could score 6 runs. The Rockies could score 4. I'd push. Whereas I just need 4 runs out of the Rockies. Now, granted, sure, the Braves could score 8 runs, and the Rockies could score 3, and I'd lose my bet. But the full game total would go over. But I do think there's better value on betting the Rockies over their number versus the full game going over. So that's where I fired. All right, so let's move to the next game. I didn't skip any, right? No. Okay, Pirates Brewers. Mitch Keller, Wade Miley. Now this game is likely going to include a fairly popular pitcher in Mitch Keller, who we said for years, right? The stuff Mitch Keller had was always good, right? It's not like what we've seen from him this year. It's like, oh my God, this is crazy how well he's pitching. We've seen this. We've seen the upside with him. What he hasn't been able to string together is the mental aspect. It almost felt like he pitched 4 innings where you'd be like, wow, this guy's phenomenal. Great movement on his pitches, great spin rate, throws hard. Just never put it all together. This year, finally putting it all together. He's been really good. High K rate, low ERA, walks are down. Just been good right now. When we say good, is he good where he's worth 10.8K on the road against Milwaukee? Good. Yeah, that I don't think so. Obviously, you have to pick some pitchers today. He wouldn't be one I would target at that price tag. Again, we talk about upside. Does he have the upside to get you there? I guess possible. Wade Miley, I think this is his return off the IL, right? I think. I'm a Miley guy. I do like him. He's crafty. But is he going to be on a somewhat of a pitch limit today? Possible. He doesn't. You basically can't play him in DFS. He doesn't strike anybody out, but he is cheap enough. I don't like this spot in any regard. What I do think on this spot, to be honest, is I do think this makes sense. At this number, it is a slight lean over. Again, 8.5 Milwaukee. It's a fair number at that park for there to be runs, and you have 2 live lineups, right? So I do think it makes sense in some regards. Brewers went through their big pen arms yesterday, I believe. I think they won a close game. So, don't love anything about this game in particular. Definitely don't love the pitching from either end, which again would make me, I guess, like some of the bats. So if you can find some bats, some mini stacks of cheap bats on either end, I don't mind it. Obviously, you hate to target Mitch Keller because he's been so good. But man, this spot makes it's not a crazy good spot for him in particular. So yeah, I do lean there to be runs in that spot. Mets Cardinals. So Senga's probably one of the is crazy. This sounds probably one of the better arms in this 4 o'clock window to target. Again, you gotta pick spots somewhere in DFS to pay up. Senga's high at 10.8 for a guy that really doesn't strike out a lot of guys, and this is like a ceiling price for him. I know he was 10.6 earlier in the year, but was he ever 10.7? No, he was 10.6, and that was the most. He just feels like the safest play. I know that sounds crazy, but the Cardinals just go down swinging, and the Cardinals are in another one of these mini slumps again, which they've been in all too often this year. So yeah, I mean, I know it's 160, which feels like a big number, but the Mets now winners of 2 straight. Feels like they're maybe going to turn the corner. And the Cardinals are still getting decent market respect here. Wainwright's been tough to watch, and I know that he pitched okay for the start. I had him in on Sunday. Definitely pitched good enough to get the win. To ask him to throw another good start against a live lineup that might be finally starting to find themselves a bit. I think it makes sense to target Senga here. Again, I don't love it betting wise because I feel like the line's relatively fair, maybe slightly soft in favor of the Mets. But again, I didn't love enough to fire there. But Senga, as far as pitching goes, probably my favorite pitcher on the slate between the 4 o'clock games for the price. And you can have so many cheaper stacks anyway, so you could just tag him with another lighter price pitcher if you'd like. All right, so let's move over Red Sox Yankees. This is a rematch from Sunday. Clark Schmidt, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty confident he's now thrown 5 straight. Is it 5 straight quality starts or 5 straight 5 inning, 3 earned or less, 2 earned or less starts from him? So a guy that was borderline a gas can for earlier in the year, definitely is kind of righted the ship a bit. I thought he pitched pretty well on Sunday. Thought he deserved potentially to grab a win. Bello pitched really good as well. I think Bello pitched 7 innings. So in this spot, slight lean Yanks just because Schmidt's been good. And not that Bello hasn't been, but this line was in Yankee Stadium. I think the Yankees were like minus 120, right? Minus 125, something like that. In the exact same start. And now you turn around and this line moves like 40 cents just because of home field. I don't know if I agree with that. So yeah, I feel like every time I bet Clark Schmidt this year, he's just burned money for me. So I don't love that. That's why I didn't bet it. But yeah, at the price, it does feel like there's value on the Yanks there. Again, there's this market perception that Clark Schmidt sucks, and he hasn't recently. So slightly Yanks, don't love it though. Glad you're on board there, boy. Miller kid for Yanks. Yeah, I'll talk on him. Obviously, we're like 2 games away from that. Yeah, Cody, just to recap, just because you're one of my boys, I did the best bets that I made for today were Rockies over 3.5. Team total, Reds Astros over 8. And I got one more game coming for this next one. So Padres Rays, Blake Snell, Zach Eflin. I'll be honest, this isn't something I often do. I don't often chase pitchers throwing well. That would be Blake Snell. So Blake Snell, who started the season awful, has really found form. But what I know about Blake Snell is this is who he is. This is what he does. He goes through these streaks of really good pitching performances and really bad pitching performances. He's in the middle of a stretch. I think it's like 20 innings of 2 earned or less, something like that. He's pitching really well, and it's a big confidence factor for him, and we know he's got good stuff. There's just some mental aspect to it, I guess, and also control because, when he's off, he's walking a ton of dudes. And Zach Eflin on the road. I just feel like I'm getting a double perfect storm. I'm getting the better version. I'm getting the better version of Blake Snell, who's in the middle of a stretch. So, I bet the Padres money line. Okay, just to make sure that's clear. And I feel like I'm getting, again, the better version of Blake Snell, and I'm getting the on-the-road version of Zach Eflin against the Padres, who, another team, much like the Mariners, barely playing 500 baseball, 3 games under, but so much talent that they should not be in this little predicament. They're 3 games under despite having a run differential of over plus 20. The Rays, though, fading the Rays never feels fun, right? I think I said this a while back. It feels like you're not going to get too many opportunities where you get the Rays at a pick 'em price or a borderline pick 'em price. They're a small dog. I just feel like this line is giving respect to Eflin that makes little sense. This dude consistently struggles when he throws on the road, especially against good lineups. Padres definitely have the sticks to perform here. The bullpen does worry me a bit, but it's not like the Rays bullpen has been fantastic either. They've been good, but definitely not fantastic. So I know I'm getting the starting pitching edge. I'm not convinced that I'm getting a lineup edge. I'm not convinced that the Rays have a better lineup than the Padres, like top to bottom lineup. And then bullpen-wise, I think it's more even than we think, and I get the Padres at home. So I feel like there's a lot more check boxes in my favor at laying minus 115. So that's what I did. I bet the Padres. I bet the fact that Blake Snell will continue to resurge. And yes, he will go through another dry spell where he pitches poorly, but he has been pitching well. And I do think the price is good, all things considered. So gotcha, Cody. So yes, I did fire on the Padres. That was my last best bet of the day. Dodgers Giants, Alex Wood, and yes, Boyan's boy from the Dodgers, Bobby Miller. Some may call him Robert. Man, has this dude been good? You always have question marks, right, about young pitching, how long it can sustain. Because yes, he's been good, but let's be honest, like he hasn't been as good as his ERA and WHIP, right? So you figure there is some regression coming. At what level is where that question mark starts to, grow subjective wings. But he has been really good, and this is like I continue to say, and I hate to sound like a broken record. This is what the Dodgers do. They do really well with their pitching, or starting pitching arms, especially, right? The issue I have with Miller is he was just so bad in AAA that it makes you think, like mechanically speaking, when he got brought up, did they fix something mechanically with him? I don't know that answer, but I do know he's been very good. He hasn't given up a single home run. He's not walking anybody. His strikeouts are somehow higher in the majors than they were in AAA. He's just been good, right? And yes, again, regression's coming, but to the extent is what I don't know. But what I do know is he's been very good. And the problem is is the market starting to take too much effect of it, right? Because now obviously he's starting to get trendy, right? And minus 165 does feel like a line that's a little padded. I'm not an Alex Wood guy though. I used to be. I think now he relies too much on being crafty. He doesn't throw hard at all anymore. Not that he ever was a guy that blazed anything by you, but he's just not as tricky now. So yeah, I think that it's tough for me to want to lay a half run first five with a guy that I do believe regression's coming. I just don't know to what extent. But he's been fun. He's been fun to watch. And yeah, who knows how long it'll sustain itself, but he's been very good, very good. So yeah, as far as a side in the game, I don't have any horse in the race. I would argue for some slight value on the over just because of that said regression, the fact that I don't trust Alex Wood, and I also don't trust either of these bullpens. With that said, I do think it's relatively fair game, all things considered. Last but not least, D-backs Guardians, late night hammer, if you will. Shane Bieber, I did bet him on Sunday, if you guys remember. Felt like the Guardians series, I forgot against which team that was, but I felt like every day of that series last week from Friday to Sunday zigzagged far too much in every direction, starting with Tristan McKenzie, the second start, which I forgot who that was, and then the third start with Bieber, where I felt like I got Bieber at a really cheap price. On this end, I don't know if you're getting Bieber at such a cheap price. I do prefer Bieber at home for sure. The concerning part here is that I don't trust Tommy Henry. He's been okay, but again, I feel like he's also been a little lucky to have the ERA that he does. He's consistently dealing with runners on base. The Guardians don't have a lot of right-handed bats, though, to really attack him. I would say this game makes sense for the under. However, I do think the D-backs tag Bieber a bit today or tonight, and then Henry is tough to trust. All things considered, slight lean D-backs here just because of the road issues I have with Bieber. But I do think the line's relatively fair, though. I was actually hoping this line would be a little softer. I was hoping Cleveland would be minus 125, minus 130 here. It doesn't look like they're going to get there because if they were, I would have actually fired the D-backs. But I think the line's relatively fair where it is. Again, slight value D-backs, but I don't love it. And again, from a bullpen perspective, this game is close late. I know the D-backs bullpen has been good, but I do trust the Guardians bullpen more. So yeah, nothing I love in that game in particular. So the three games is where I fired on. Appreciate you guys obviously watching the video. And look, just a real quick, I will be back tomorrow. It's going to be just me and Gary on the baseball show. I'll host. I'll talk some bets. I'll let Gary do DFS. So the show should feel a little smoother. There's also no NASCAR race tomorrow, right? So, I get a little break there. It's probably a good break for me anyway, with how much of a tax write-off that sport's been for me this year. But all that considered, thank you for everybody for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I wish you guys all the best of luck with all your bets today, all your gambling today in general. I know that obviously we've got the U.S. Open major, so I'm sure many of you are sweating that. UFC card later. And yes, tomorrow is also Father's Day, so quick shout out to all the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day. But with all that said, gamble responsibly, stay safe. And as always, folks, run pure. See you guys tomorrow.